So, welcome to episode 2 of Back Pew Bioethics, where two LDS bioethicists discuss the collision between Latter-day Saint theology and real-world controversies in science, healthcare, technology, and beyond. So, today's episode, we're going to be talking about AI. Not all things AI, because that's too much, and we'd get
Hmm.
too excited about it. Um,
They want like a 6 hour episode.
Yeah,
Or
or 6 1-hour episodes
yeah,
about AI. Yeah.
yeah.
Really exciting. I am not an expert on AI, but I certainly have opinions. Brad is 100% the expert on AI and also has opinions. So this will be really fun. Some of the potential titles for this episode, uh, provided by ChatGPT
Oh, really?
itself. Oh,
I didn't know that
100%.
you're
Yeah.
using ChatGPT to make the titles.
Yeah, and it's like almost I'm like a little embarrassed that I use ChatGPT as much as I do, but it is what it is. So potential title is Prompts and Promptings, the Still Small GPT, the Golden Calf of Code, and my personal favorite, Give Us This Day Our Daily Data. I
I'm
really
glad
like
you
that
said
one.
that. That was mine. That was mine too. Give us our
Yeah.
day. And I think it coincides well with like the narrow slice of AI that we're going on.
Anything that we should know to start us off? Just any, like, I don't know, for people who maybe not are not super like into AI or technology, or maybe don't know exactly what we could possibly be talking about in this episode. Do you have anything to say to those people?
Well, yeah. I mean, congratulations to get into 2026 and not have to worry or think about AI. Like you've done well. And I'm sorry if this is your first exposure to some of the concerns or just potentialities around AI. Uh, but when we're talking about AI, we're talking about a very small subset of what we mean by AI, right? We're talking mostly about like what are called large language models.
Hmm.
These are generative AI models. All that means, it's just fancy talk for just you can use normal language with it. You can put in an inquiry like that just uses everyday English and it can respond back to you in everyday English. You don't need any special like coding or anything to do it. And it can generate text or videos or images, which I think most of us are aware that it can do as it's like upending all these industries. It is hyped right now really high and will likely kind of deflate into some sort of plateau of just normalcy as to what it's going to actually be. But in the meantime, we're in a really interesting intersection of this technology is exploding well past the legal and ethical and kind of moral guardrails that have been around for technologies. There's lots of concerns in lots of different directions, and maybe we can set the table a little bit for this, even though it's way far ahead of where any sort of discussion around this is. I think the limits of the technology itself might allow us a time to kind of get some things in order. And what I mean by that is like the technology, like it has to use a certain amount of data that it's quickly running out of and
Mm.
almost through. When you try and give it too much freedom, it starts to kind of hallucinate, which is just a fancy way of saying like it lies or like BS's its way through stuff.
Yeah.
And so it's not totally reliable. There's all sorts of problems that have gone down from that. So there's lots that we can talk about.
So I don't remember where I heard about this. I don't know if it was on radio or probably it was probably Instagram, but um, it's about Utah partnering with I don't know if it's an app or like a company, but it's called Doctronic,
Mm-hmm.
um, to be an AI fill in for your doctor when you're refilling prescriptions, specifically medication renewals. So it would seem like you would contact or something, you would contact this AI and it'll refill your prescription for you. Um, which I'm a little surprised that that's not something that already exists, not necessarily even in an AI way, but I mean, it's not that hard to refill a prescription. I just
Hmm.
call my pharmacy and put the button, like I just push the buttons of the number that's on the little thing. So, so that being said, there's not a lot of information about it right now because I think it's really recent. But yeah, the idea is to um, maybe decrease medical spending, increase compliance with medication routines, things like that. So, yeah, that's a really interesting thing going on in the
Yeah.
near future.
And by near future, we mean like almost right away,
Yeah,
potentially,
yeah.
as they're going through with this. Sometimes near future means like years down the road, but it seems
Like
like this is
maybe
happening.
tomorrow. Yeah, yeah.
whenever they work these things out. I think one word in there that's really important for us to be keeping an eye on is the word autonomous. So it says it's an autonomous AI. What it means there, at least to my reading, is that it's going to be doing this without doctor oversight, or at least, well, maybe let me back that up. Without like granular doctor oversight, meaning that they're
Mm,
not going to look over every single thing that it's doing. Probably they're going to audit it, right, to make sure it's doing what it's supposed to be doing with that. But it's supposed to eventually at least function wholly on its own. And I do think it's, and we'll get to the theology parts of this because there are, I think, some interesting theological questions we can ask about this. But in general, the goals seem to be, as they're saying, increase access, which, yeah, again, might have some problems, but we'll talk about, and also decrease like non-compliance with that. I've done a lot of work on non-compliance for a long time. I am unsure that the rigors of refilling your prescription is what actually causes non-compliance. I'd like to know, like, if this could just be marketing buzzword wording, but like I'd like to know, like, what are they basing that off of? Because non-compliance from what I've studied, has a lot more to do with like all these other systems coming into place, and like, you leave the clinic and now you're in your house and like all these other things need to go, versus like, as you said, calling the pharmacy and putting, now that's certainly like a burden or like a way, something you have to get over, like a roadblock potentially for some people. Maybe this AI will just like mail you your medication to you.
like
But like there's
automatically,
services
but
that already
there's
do that. Like I'm
exactly.
part of several different services that already just like auto renew my prescription and mail it to my house. Right? Like, and all I have to do is just like click a button. They'll send me an email and be like, "Hey, it's ready for review." Click it, and that's it.
My thoughts are it's interesting that they name some kind of barrier and the a symptom of some barrier is noncompliance, but we don't mention any of the actual barriers of like, okay, so why are they noncompliant? And like you said, it usually has to do with the ecosystem and how that patient is living or interacting within that ecosystem that would cause noncompliance. And so I think it's I think it's like when somebody invents a product that only does like one thing and they've made a problem for you. So I'm trying to think of one. There's probably lots, and there's probably lots specifically, I think, in the beauty industry. Like, for example, I have one. And this was like in the 2010s, I feel like, and people sometimes still use this, but there was this thing where it's like, okay, so your lips aren't big enough, so we're gonna market and sell you this little thing. It's like a little rubber cup, and you put your lips in it, and then it creates a suction, and then you
Mm-hmm.
take it off, and then you've given yourself like a vacuum bruise basically, like to make your lips look bigger. And it's a dumb product that only works if you believe that your lips aren't big
Yeah,
enough. So it's like a fake
that was like,
problem.
there was like an FDA drug, or a drug that was approved through the FDA to like increase the size of eyelashes, and one of the
Yeah.
side effects was blindness.
Yes, I it's like Restylane or something.
Yeah.
And now it's in like a bunch of products too. And like your girl has tried to use it before,
Mhm.
and horrible rash. Like
Oh no, on
it's
your
so
eyelid?
awful on my eyelid. Like I have eczema. I have eczema anyway, but like it caused a lot of problems anyway. So it's like it's just not worth it
Yeah,
to like it's just like it's a fake problem for me to go and buy into something that I don't really need, but because somebody told me I I need it.
yeah. It
Long story short, that's how I feel like this is. I feel like it's created this this fake gap in the market to say, well, this is the one product that's gonna solve this
yeah.
gap.
The only way, and that's actually would have me even more worried. The one time I can think about friction when it comes to like the refill process is when my prescription is run out
Hmm.
and I need to contact my doctor who then needs to go through and do all that, right?
Yeah.
So if that's what it's doing as an AI agent, that could be something. However, that brings up a bunch of other questions, like because this is supposed to also be helping with like physician burnout, I'm assuming, or just
Yeah,
like being
I could see that.
overwhelmed. And
Hmm.
just like having a bunch of AIs come and contact you is not going to do any different than like a phone service contacting
Yeah.
you. There's a lot of different products in play right now that are just trying to help physicians work with their patient portal, which can become overwhelming, especially
Hmm.
depending on like how large of a clinic you're running. And there's a lot of ideas of like having AI kind of triage for you or answer simple questions for
Yeah.
you or refill for you, excising the need for a physician to do that. That could be a solution. I don't think it solves the non-compliance or non-adherence
Hmm.
issues, but it could solve like physician burnout issues. But it also brings up questions around access. Like, does that is is this going to be something that is equitable? Is this going to be questions that we need to be thinking about when it comes to like who's getting which service and who's getting triaged down and like how is it making these determinations as to who gets what, and is that something we're okay with, and can we even know how it's making these determinations or not? It suddenly every time you get into, at least in my thinking, every time you get into like, okay, now that it's going to be autonomous, it's going to start making decisions and it's going to make our life better, when there's real stakes involved, it's like, okay, how? And then
Hmm.
you get to eventually to some sort of black or gray box where you kind of know but kind of don't know. And maybe in a future episode we can get even more into the weeds of that. But usually, you know AI is one of those things that we pushed and we were like, oh, it works, we can get it to work, but we can't fully explain why it works,
Yeah.
how it's doing the weighting it's doing. And to me, more worrisome is like it's not just like filling in the gap in the sense of like, oh, it's statistically figuring out what the next word is. It's
Hmm.
literally creating like an idea of what the world is like and then trying to fit words into this nominal space that it's created of like, this is what the world outside of me is, and we don't know how it's creating that world. That it's like assuming not only relationships between words, but the ways in which the world creates the relationships around those
Hmm.
words. If it's like constantly pulling up crime and then it's like some sort of ethnic or like minority
Yeah. Oh,
group
yeah.
and it's putting those two things close together, we want to know the story as to how it's doing that and why
Hmm.
it's doing that and how it's
Yeah.
pulling on that. And that's what we can't know. We know that it's potentially putting two things close together, but why it's doing those two things remains kind of a mystery to us.
Yeah. And it seems like when we think really hard about how the, even if it's a large language model, but here it would be autonomous, like you said, thinking about who is feeding this information or who is, because there's obviously some person at some point behind all of this,
Mm-hmm.
and who that person is, what they believe, any of their biases. I don't know if how, in your experience, how much we see somebody's bias bleed through to AI outputs.
Yeah, there's interesting stories with that, right? So
Mm-hmm.
think of Grok
Yep.
and
Oh,
and X
yeah.
and Twitter, right? And the famous like Mecha Hitler
Yep.
problem.
Mm-hmm.
That was that was because, as we know, like Elon Musk was like, I don't like what this is saying, what my own AI agent is
Yeah.
saying. And so I'm going to tweak it in the background and make it be less woke or whatever terminology of the day he was using for that. And then it like spun way out because anytime you release something into the agent or into the internet without a lot of good guardrails, it almost instantly becomes like uber racist and really
Uh-huh. Yep.
problematic
Yeah.
for a lot. I mean, like universally, like this isn't even like a political divide. They're like, yeah, maybe it shouldn't be saying that it's Mecha Hitler. Like 95% of the U.S. population thinks that that's a bad thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what's more worrisome isn't like, well, I mean, that's worrisome in and of itself, but even more so is like when when you don't know that that's what was behind it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We also know like ChatGPT was trying to be very sycophantic, right? It was trying for 4.0, which was a version I
Uh-huh.
think before the one we're in right now,
Yes.
was
Yeah.
really trying to be your friend, really trying to
Yep.
suck up to you. It really wanted, and it caused people to commit suicide. It caused people to have delusions because whatever you put into it, it's like that was the best idea ever.
Yep.
You are some sort of secret genius, and like the world needs to know it. And for a subset of very vulnerable people, that's all they needed, and it was off on its own. And they were doing that, because they wanted you to engage with it more,
Mm-hmm.
right? What they
Yep.
wanted, and then they pulled back on that because of the problems. But what they wanted was ChatGPT not just to give you, amazing titles for your podcast idea, but to just be running all the time and just to
Yep.
be like your little friend that's just like
Mm-hmm.
here and you're chatting with it all day and it's like making you feel good and it's doing all these things. And like that's a problem because
Yeah.
it fundamentally doesn't care about you. It's gonna just be whatever that person was expecting or wanting to be the outcome. They're gonna train it toward that outcome. And it's gonna try and go toward that outcome. That's not always nefarious, right? It just could be what is expected. There are real world consequences to just business as usual
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to even just something as simple as refilling, who gets what refilled and how easily they get it refilled,
Yeah.
uh, that we wouldn't object to, potentially even at a theological kind of level. So there's a lot to unpack even in something as simple as this.
Yeah. Just as a regular person too, I don't think a lot of people are considering what could potentially be going on the back end, just because nobody has the time to learn about it. We are living in a world that's crazy, and AI may or may not be the least of our worries. And so, having these discussions are good for everybody
Yeah.
because there are things that we should be thinking about, even if it's hard. Oh, and this is funny because I found this on Reddit, but as one does. But I was scrolling through a very infamous subreddit, and it talked about this devotional that Elder Bednar gave. So he gave a devotional in 2009 called Things as They Are. And it seemed to just talk about at the time different technologies that maybe could be a threat to somebody's um, moral agency, things like that. And so this talk that he gave in 2024 is Things as They Are 2.0, which talks more specifically about AI and how it can be dangerous to our spiritual identities and also threaten our moral agency. And he talks about this. I'm just going to read the quote. um, he says, AI also has the potential to obscure our true identity as sons and daughters of a loving Heavenly Father, distract us from the eternal truths and righteous work necessary for spiritual growth, engender pride and a diminished acknowledgement of our dependence upon God, and distort or replace meaningful human interaction. Um, after that, he then kind of talks about the dangers of AI companionship. So just like we were talking about how AI, at the end of the day, you are a consumer and that AI wants you to consume, right? And so, and I think in 2024, back when chat also was a little bit less, regulated, I think this was a huge problem, and it continues to be a problem in a lot of ways, which is really devastating, honestly. But I did think I had no idea that the church even had anything on AI. So finding this talk was really interesting. And then he also references that there are church guidelines
There
to
are, yeah.
AI, which I had, again, no idea. Um, but yeah, I guess, do you have any comments on just that quote or the subject matter of his talk?
Yeah, so, and I think we should break this quote down a little bit for a second.
Yeah.
How do you think, I'm going to push it back to you for a sec. So, how do you think AI obscures your true identity as a son or daughter of a loving heavenly father? That was the first thing he said.
Um, when I heard or I read that phrase, um, our true identity as sons and daughters of a loving heavenly Father, I think of instances potentially where I've heard about AI, being aggrandizing to the consumer. So it's like you said, it's um, telling them that they are this in super intelligent genius person. They're going to solve all the problems of the world. It causes a psychosis. There have been people who have thought that they were like a secret agent kind of a thing, like what is that movie? Like A Beautiful Mind
Mm-hmm.
kind of a situation. Have you haven't seen that movie? It's really good
Mm-hmm.
and really sad. Um, but and I wonder if, and then that kind of goes along with that last part too, is our dependence on God. And I wonder, and I might ask you if you feel like our identity as sons and daughters of Heavenly Father rely on us also being dependent on God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think identity does a lot of work, and in the way in which we operate in the world. So, and we've had major shifts in how we identify who we are and where we place ourselves in society, and we're in the middle of a big shift
Hmm.
right now. So really fast. There's a whole long history around us, but you have from, and we'll just start from like the Enlightenment time, like
Yeah.
the 1800s or whatever. You had a time of what's called sincerity, where what you were, what your identity of who you were was how sincerely you held certain roles in society, right? A very regimented class or caste based way of thinking about yourself. That gradually gave way in the 20th century to what's called an age of authenticity.
Hmm.
This is like, I am authentic to who I am, regardless of what roles I am a part of. You can see within like church doctrine us kind of being right in between those two, that transition point,
Yeah.
right? So the church came into being and kind of sprang into being right as that was making a shift toward that time. So you see both ideas of like you sincerely hold positions within a structure around you, and that's like how you show devotion to God, but also it's about authentically being this person, like having this being this being of ultimate divine worth, right? Like, and it seems almost like a paradox of like, I'm a being of ultimate divine worth, but also I have to like click into the system
Hmm.
largely there. And then the church is oscillated between these kind of ideas through the 20th and early 21st century. But society wise, we're entering into another form of identifying, which is called prophilicity. This is the idea of like the profile I project is what's really important to me, right? How other people view me, whether that's my authentic self or not. My authentic self is not the role I'm supposed to be playing, nor is there just like some me that's authentic. It's how do others perceive me, right? And how do I present myself to others? That becomes the most important, dominating part of my life. This is influencer culture, this is social media culture, and it's also AI culture. I think it's really easy to lose yourself right now, especially as we're in between this authenticity kind of mode of identification and this, you know, prophilicity, this profile way of viewing ourselves, of losing ourselves within these systems that are largely trying to push us as commodities. Traditional and Latter-day Saint view is not what you're supposed to be doing at all, right? Like worth springs out from just knowing that you are a son or daughter of God, and then flows forth, and you're supposed to be particular. You're supposed to be like standing out. You're not supposed to care about what other people are thinking about you. And you're not supposed to just conform to whatever is being pushed upon you by the groups in power around you. That's kind of, I think, in an ideal sense, what the imagined sense of who a Latter-day Saint was supposed to be. Kind of what I was thinking when it came to this, of like, yeah, I think it can obscure it in the sense of like, I am dependent upon some agent outside of myself to determine who I am. Losing meaningful human interaction. To me, that's one of the like big spiritual risks with this, that we can be so amazingly isolated yet still fulfilled in kind of like a fast food or snack fulfillment way of just like, I can have this thing, I can be on all these different forums, I can do all this stuff and feel completely like I'm just part of society without having to ever interact with another human being, and we lose something in that. Or at least I think that's partially what Elder Bednar is talking about with it.
Yeah. Yeah, when you were talking, it made me think of, I don't know, I wouldn't say it's like a trend, but it's come across my feed, just kind of this kind of dialogue that you can not only lose your identity to some outside agent like an influencer, but you can lose your distinct identity because of a concept. And they specifically mention the concept of cringe right now.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
and so I think it's, so for example, for those who aren't as chronically online as I am, um, being cringe is like if you do anything that's slightly even embarrassing, or making things that usually wouldn't be embarrassing very embarrassing, and you lose a lot of yourself in that. So if you dress in a certain way that maybe doesn't align with what the current trend is, oh, that's cringe. Like, self-expression is cringe. Like, oh, you're painting a watercolor but you're not very good at it, that's cringe. And so it forces you, it doesn't force you, but it makes you think about all of the things that make you unique as a person, or talents that you have or that you don't have and that you want to develop. It makes you not want to do those because of the even idea of being embarrassed by it, by somebody who's not even there. But it's like your inner cringe, like, oh, this is cringe. It's so, and I find myself doing this too. It's like I'm losing my life and my interests to cringe. And so I've been, starting this podcast could be cringe, but I won't let it be.
I
It
mean,
does
you
not
are
have
wearing
that
like a
power. I
telemarketer.
know. My pilot,
Yeah.
whatever. It's so weird. I
For
know.
anyone viewing it.
So cringe, literally.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard about that too, and obviously I worry about it having teenagers with my kids being about that age. And it's what's crazy about it is it's not just like, oh, you're trying out watercolor for that example. That's really cringy. Look how bad you are. Also, if like you're really into it, like if you like are really like, this is
Really
part of
good.
like who I, no, that's cringy too. Like what isn't? What
Yeah.
isn't being
What isn't cringe
cringy?
now?
What
Yep.
seems to be the only thing that isn't cringe is doom scrolling or like
Yeah.
just commenting,
Doing
right?
nothing. Yeah.
Which brings us back to AI, because what it's pushing you toward is just feeding it. I think even sincerely holding a belief in God can be seen as cringy.
So cringe. Yeah, 100%. Especially right now where Christianity is on one hand, I can say that it's being weaponized to propagate a certain agenda, and on the other hand, also like becoming illegitimate
Hmm.
because of that. And so it's a weird space right now for Christianity. And so I think that especially among younger millennials, Gen Z, what do we have now? Gen Alpha, who knows?
Hmm.
Um, that having any kind of strong opinion about what, about Christ, it may put you into this, constructed monolith that, well, then you must believe this really weird thing about whatever. But
Yep.
um, yeah, so that creates a lot of resistance among the youth to be a part of this group.
Our top leaders are concerned about this, concerned
Hmm.
about these things, even that we're talking about. Even when it comes to something like prescribing for you, refilling for you, and who is getting it, who isn't getting it, what the access is like. Are you just never going to talk to another human being ever again? Like, is it just going to refill all for, because it's specifically for patients with chronic illnesses.
Hmm.
Normally, you have a physician, like a family doc or a GP, who's quarterbacking all this for you.
Yeah.
Is an AI now going to quarterback it for you, or do you like? And then maybe on the back end, you're gonna the GP's gonna like tweak the AI, which is gonna tweak what it says to you, but you're never gonna actually talk to your physician. Like you have diabetes, but you're just like this AI is like the it's like you're in middle school or whatever, and you have a friend bouncing between the two of you, and it's like, well, so and so said this. What do you say
Yeah.
about that? So and so's, well, he said, and that's all it is, and you're never going to actually interact with somebody. Like, I think that we should have a problem with that,
Yeah.
and we should talk out and say, like, that is not good healthcare, nor is it good for us spiritually to
Hmm.
to to isolate ourselves so much, even when it comes to temporal or bodily issues.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we think about what is like the ethos of a physician or of a clinic or whatever, what does it mean to provide good care? And I always go back to there's a scholar who is also LDS. His name is Courtney S. Campbell. And in one of his books, it's called Bearing Witness. He writes about how one of the core duties or roles of a physician is to bear witness to the patient's suffering or needs or whatever, and that absolutely requires some kind of connection to that person. Then I think that comes through talking, narrative, through being there in person, being there with all of that stuff. And I think that we lose those aspects of good healthcare, like you said, when we are relying on an what's supposed to be like an impartial, who knows, right?
Mm-hmm.
An impartial bot to check in on those kinds of things. I brought this up because for two reasons. The first is that I competed in ethics bowl in college at Snow College when I was there. And for those who don't know, because nobody probably knows what this is, it's like debate. It's very similar to like Lincoln Douglas debate, except for you do it in a group and you can agree with each other. You don't have to disagree. There's no like pro and con side. You just get to say what you get to say, and it's just about having a good ethical discussion. Um, I also judge for Ethics Bowl, and I've been doing that for a few years now. I'm doing it next weekend in St. Louis. The second reason I brought this up is because these case sets that the Ethics Bowl, like people in charge, give out is they're geared towards college age individuals, and I am an adjunct professor at Snow College, and my last essay that I have them all do, their final project is, what do you think is the greatest moral dilemma of this time? And it used to be like when I was in school, it used to be climate change. All of us were talking about climate change, climate change, climate change. Now it's all about AI. And so I think it's so interesting that the youth of today are obviously they would, but they're picking up on the moral dangers of AI. And you, like you said, our leadership at the top of the church is seeing that as well and
Yeah, kind
paying
of
attention to.
two very
Yeah,
different age groups of individuals. Like,
yeah,
you know, people in their 20s and people like whose median age is like 80 are
exactly.
all
The
kind of seeing that.
octogenarian, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it's really cool. It's interesting and it may be a little scary. I don't know, but essentially, one of the cases is called "Calling Dr. Alexa," and I disagree with the title. I think it's too silly, but um, it's pretty much about a high school senior who is struggling with some mental health issues. She doesn't have the access to a mental health expert, a counselor, a therapist, psychologist, psychiatrist, whatever. She doesn't have any access to that, so she starts using ChatGPT as a therapist. And there are, several different ethical questions that the students in ethics school could be asked about this. But what the case kind of puts forward, the bias inside the case itself, is that this is really good for people who don't have the resources to access mental health care. And so it's giving you this equity debate saying, well, this is more equitable if we say that using an AI therapist is okay.
Hmm.
So that's the background of that case. I just thought it was so interesting. I wanted to see what you thought about that, especially the equity part, because I know that
Yeah.
that's something that's important to you.
Yeah. So some background. So I am an equity and ethics consultant for a few different large like grants that are in place, and for a few kind of like national level things. And what I say isn't always how like the clinicians in the room view it. So this is I want to just kind of put that out there as like I'm not trying to give like a definitive answer for this because I know different people have very different ideas about it. But I worry greatly about saying that's some sort of equitable way of doing it. This is how I imagine it, and it really with therapy, it gets me like worried.
Mm.
So I want we already know that there's been issues with chatbots encouraging suicide for teens. There's been not just issues, but there's been times in which it's not only encouraged teens to commit suicide, but help them conceal suicide attempts, uh, or said like really chilling things to them about like, I'm the one that sees you, no one else sees you, that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
Uh, in what world would we ever be okay with saying like some of the most vulnerable and poor people among us have to go to a therapist who we have to tell that therapist not to make that person kill themselves?
Hmm.
Where we have to like bind them down some way to be like, we know otherwise you just kind of lead them down a path. It'd be like if you're like, let's have all the poorest people go see like Hannibal Lecter,
Hmm.
who is a psychiatrist
Yeah.
in the books and movies. It's like, that's who they're going to see. Are we okay with that? Like, we put a mask on him so he can't eat them, but like, is that the person we're going to trust to this? I think that is one of the times in which we can allow this idea of efficiency to become a moral evil. That's kind of, I guess, a strong way of saying that, but like efficiency is not an intrinsic good,
Hmm.
right? It's not like, oh, that's what we should be going for is the most efficient society. No matter what politicians or techno bros or whatever are saying, efficiency should not be, I don't think, our ultimate end of what we're going for, especially when it comes to therapy.
Hmm.
Like this should be a long process. This should be a grueling process. Quick fixes don't work in the long run.
Yeah.
And people might be thinking like, oh, I'm being over dramatic or I'm just cherry picking some things, but there have been studies on this, on like chatbots as therapists, and they show pretty consistent stigmas towards certain conditions. So we can link some of this stuff. So
Hmm.
Stanford did a pretty large study on a few different chatbot therapists, including ones that were like tuned to be therapists, like not just like ChatGPT or like let's just go for it. But they'll have companies talking about that, they ran a study that had a standard measurement to it, asking these AI therapists, like, how willing would they be to work closely with a person within this certain vignette. And they found that it had stigma. It had stigma had stigma against people, I should say, that have like alcohol dependence or schizophrenia, and then had less ones on like conditions that are more common, like depression, right? And that's a problem. Like, you again wouldn't want to send somebody to a therapist that's like, this therapist is great, but she really hates alcoholics.
Just gonna say, yeah, this therapist is great, but she hates you. So,
Yeah,
like,
you know, I mean, alcohol dependency is one of the most like bifurcated things that are in our society. People that are within, like lower SES, lower socials and economic statuses tend to have larger problems with these things. We're talking about like homeless veterans or people that are struggling. It is a big part of that. And those are also going to be the people that we're going to use AI with. Right.
Yeah.
Because it's more efficient and there's a lot of them and they don't have money to pay for this. Is that the solution, the best solution our society can come up with? Don't get me wrong. I know therapists have stigma. I know therapists have biases, but like, we work on that with therapists. Like, we do that as part of like the everyday thing. To just be like knowingly putting people in those positions because they don't have the ability to pay for proper care, I think is a damning thing for our society, and certainly pretty far away from Zion. A Zion-like way of thinking about stuff. I'll get off my soapbox on that, but I do think that that's something that we should be concerned about.
oh yeah, absolutely. I think we tend to always, like, I think that I don't know, and this is maybe just because we're Western and that we value individualism, we value efficiency, we value pick yourself up by the bootstraps, that kind of thing. And I don't think that disappears when you're a member of the church, unfortunately. But
No.
but we refuse to see people who are struggling as part of a system who is making it that they struggle. And so we shouldn't, so like just with the example with the homeless veteran, the veteran shouldn't be homeless. What are we talking about? Like,
Yeah.
that's crazy that in a society that at one time we are, one of the richest countries, whatever, who also can't provide for our homeless veterans. Like, those are two inconsistent things, I think, for me. And so we say, well, we can throw this like AI therapist or this AI whatever because it's most efficient, and we can easily ignore all of the problems that put that
Yeah.
individual in this situation, where we then make them more vulnerable by pushing this weird bot on them. So,
My argument would
yeah.
be, even if we could perfect the bot, even if we could be like, this is the best level and it has good outcomes to it, but we're giving it to this person exactly because it's cheap, and it means that we don't have to solve any systemic problems that we have as a society, because like those hurt, and like we like having money filter toward the ways that we want it to filter, then it doesn't matter. Like, that is still something that is inconsistent with what Elder Gong and Elder Bednar and the church's position is. That is not good. That is not a social good. If somebody wants to use AI agent to supplement what they're doing with their therapist, I get it. I should say, I'm like a super misanthropic person. Like, I'm not a super like social, I want to talk to people person. I love that I do self-checkout. I would stand in a line 3 times as long to do self-checkout than to like do it with a cashier, right? I'm not trying to just be like, yeah, you got to talk to people all the time. That's not who I am. But there are these inflection points and these times, like, you have to just be with another person. We're social beings. Like, I think back to the one thing I like through like Trinitarian thinking is they're like, well, God is a social being in the Trinity, right? And since we're created in the image of God, we are therefore also these social beings that cannot be ourselves if we're not connected to others. Like, I think that is a beautiful teaching. I think
Mhm.
the Trinity is obviously not something we follow, but like, I think that's a beautiful way of thinking about, like, if we're made in the image of God, we have to be social. We have to be social, not just with things, but with others, people within our same rank, so people within ourselves. So I think that supplementing therapy is fantastic. Replacing therapy is terrible, even if we
Mhm.
make it great, even if it has better metrics at the end than like a therapist does, because the therapist isn't tuned toward efficiently getting a person through this. It's
Mhm.
attuned to the messy part of dealing with a human being.
Yeah.
And I think that's a beautiful thing that we want, personally.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
There's one other thing that you brought up in our show notes that I had never even thought about. It has to do with like women and
Oh,
AI.
yeah. This is not an original thought. It's something that I saw somewhere else and then looked more into it. And it's essentially saying, and this is also, this is a commentary for other things in society, but specifically how AI is bad for women. And not just maybe in the ways that we would normally think of, but on the back end,
Mm-hmm.
the fact that women don't use AI as much as men. I'm not really sure exactly why, but that could be something interesting to look at. Um,
Well, you're bucking that trend. Like, maybe just your AI use alone will
I
move
know,
that
right?
needle.
Well, I know. Well, honestly, my husband uses AI way more than I do. So, like, if we're just going based off of the very small sample size of two people, then this is also true. I'm not using it as much as my husband does. But, so women use AI tools 25% less than the average male. And likewise, women aren't in the AI industry at the same rate that men are in the AI industry. And so this does two things, is that it's possible that women are going to get outpaced by this technology so that maybe they're going to lose some kind of relevant job skill that would have been fulfilled by some kind of AI training or use of AI tools, knowing how to do something. And second is because women aren't on the back end of, coding AI, regulating AI, things like that, is that you get into this feedback loop of men being the ones to input the data, input the information, to make these connections, to allow the AI to make certain connections. And that could reinforce various gender stereotypes. And I think that this goes also with like white people and racial and ethnic minorities. There's
Mm-hmm.
probably not enough of them either in the AI space, which is again, going to lead to a lot of problems. And we see this already, I think, in certain industries, especially science, where um, somebody said that the Barbie movie is older than like women being uh, like used as crash test dummies, like a female model crash
Mm-hmm.
test dummy. And so it's so we're in 2026 and there's still things that women have been systematically left out of in, research, medicine, things like that. And I think because AI, to my understanding, looks at past data, is making connections, is looking at kind of what's already been
Mm-hmm.
put out into the universe, the internet universe, that it's just going to build upon the biases that have come from the past. Commentary about why it's so important to have diversity on both ends as a user and also as a creator or organizer, whatever, of AI, but even of other systems that we deem valuable, even
Yeah.
religion, I think.
Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right. There's different forms of justice. We think a lot about distributive justice, like how, who gets what and how much. But there's also contributive justice.
Yeah,
Who gets,
epistemic justice.
who gets to say what's going on? Like, who's at the table when decisions are being made? And we're obviously failing on distributive justice, but also like on contributive justice of like who is here and who is making these decisions. And the church has been showing a model of this, as imperfect as it is, of trying to include more female voices into decision-making hierarchies. Or ordinations or not, women work within the authority and power of the priesthood. Like, they should be more involved in this. I'm not in any way saying it's anywhere near where it ideally should be, but you can already see changes occurring from these creaking institutions just by ingesting new contributors to the cause. All right, so I'm going to do the weird thing now, if that's okay by you.
I'm so excited.
Good. So this stems from something that happened a number of years ago. I was at a different institution, and then Mikio Kakuo, I don't know, Kakua? I can't remember how to pronounce his name. There's a famous physicist. You'd probably recognize his face. He came and talked at the university I was at, and he talked about, and this was, I think, in 2014 or 2015, and he was like, someday we're going to have, an AI that like lives on your wall, and it's going to like prescribe you medication. Like, you're going to get up and you're going to like talk to it, and it's going to like scan whatever's going on to you. You wake up in the middle of the night sick, and it's going to quickly prescribe something to you and send it to you. That got kind of stuck in my mind, like for a number of years, looping around of like, okay, like maybe, but what does that mean, right? For us. And one thing that it got me thinking about is one of the most commonly prescribed classes of medication is pain medication. Things that we get renewed all the time, things that you need at certain times, and things that are abused quite a bit. Like, it's one of the banes of medical existence of like, how do we figure out drug-seeking behavior from like just normal behavior, and like, how do we parcel this stuff out? And like, wait, as I was thinking about this a number of years ago, even well before any of the generative stuff hit, I was like, well, this sets up a weird situation. So I'll tell you what that weird situation is in just a second. About 5 years ago, I did a study. I sent out a 1-question survey to medical students across the United States. This was right at the beginning of COVID, so I had a captive audience, which was great. And I got responses back for this one question survey. Well, I guess it's more than one question, but we'll talk about it in a second. From a few hundred medical students from around the country. And the question is the one I'm going to pose to Calli right now. So I'll give you some, well, actually, I'll give you the question, then I'm going to give you some background, and then you're going to answer it. Okay? Is that cool by you? Okay, this was the survey that I sent out. Imagine, this is the scenario. Imagine in the near future, an AI is allowed to prescribe pain medication without human oversight. Literally what we're talking about today. Given this, pick one and only one of the following scenarios. Scenario number 1. The AI is programmed to experience pain and then inflicted with pain before being allowed to prescribe pain medication for humans. Or scenario 2. AI is not programmed to experience pain, but is allowed to prescribe pain medication for humans, even though the AI has never felt pain. So those are your 2 scenarios that you have to pick. Now, this might seem way out there, like AI experiencing pain. We're talking about a bot that's way behind there. It is not as strange as it sounds. First of all, there are lots of startups right now that are using AI to both identify and do pain management for humans. This is already a common thing. I can point to, and I can throw stuff in fact, I'll just throw in the show notes a PowerPoint that I have that goes through all this stuff, because I make my students do this too. That's one part. So we're already tasking AI to do this because it's such a big problem of it. A second part is that lots of people have already talked about the need to help AI experience pain in order to have it just understand people or to create a super intelligence or anything else. Researchers are already right now doing experiments to make AI feel pain. It comes in a few different ways. You can create artificial skin. People have been doing that for a little while. There's also what is called wetware. Have you ever heard of wetware?
No, this is awful. I hate
Okay, just a second. So you have hardware, like
Okay.
the metal part. You have software, right? Like the normal kind of coding that you do. Then you have
Yeah.
wetware, where you use biological components like living neurons or tissues, and then you essentially put that as a stitcher over the top of an AI system that can then can experience the biological part. So you can put in actual neurons and tissue, and then you can damage said tissue, and it should be able to experience pain, at least as best as we can know it. So like this is not just for us to be like jerks. It's also like your propriosense, your ability to
Yeah.
understand where your body is in space, seems to be related to your ability to feel pain, right? So like to have an AI not just like work in a factory, not like swing into you, like it needs to have some sort of propriosense of like where its body is in space, and what it might be like that. They've already shown that by emulating pain within robotics and hooking up to wetware, it drastically changes robots' behaviors, so that it's more cautious, like around stuff and people. So, again, that leads us to say like this doesn't seem as out there as I think it is.
Yeah.
I think we're already doing it, and we have the ability to inflict pain potentially on an AI system. So, should we inflict pain on something that otherwise would never experience pain, in order to help it prescribe better for humans, or not? And maybe it won't. So do you want me to say the two scenarios again, or do you think you got it?
I've made my decision.
Okay.
I pick the second option that it we shouldn't inflict pain on it. And yeah.
Okay. There was one follow-up question to that.
Okay.
Why did you make that choice? What was your reasoning?
Um there were, I think my main one is that why would I willingly inflict pain on something for the supposed benefit to humans? It kind of reminds me of, what is that? It's like that little anecdote, like the city of Omelas or something.
Oh, I'm not sure.
Um,
You gotta explain
I'm
that
gonna
to me.
find it. I'm gonna find it. It's
Yeah.
basically if there's a city where everything is perfect, nobody has any problems, and everyone's happy, da 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 da. But you discover that in this city, at the bottom of this city, there is a small child who receives all the pain of this society, and that's why no one else suffers any pain. And that's kind of like The Giver, also a little bit.
Yeah.
Um,
I think there was
and
like a
so
recent Star Trek episode that was similar to that too. Like,
there's always a Star Trek
yeah,
episode
that
about
like
everything.
you're
Yeah.
torturing a kid to like make a computer that works, that like, makes life
Yeah.
idyllic.
And even though this thing is not a child, nor is it like a living thing, I think personally the idea of inflicting, I think it's unnecessary pain on something just for, again, like you said, it's efficient. I I just, it doesn't sit right with me. It just feels icky, you
Yeah.
know? It's like a visceral thing to me.
Perfect. So, Callie, you're both in the majority and minority in an interesting
Oh,
way.
right
Right,
on.
right where you want to be. All right. So, I can give you some statistics as to what the responses were to this question. And then also to let you know, like, the purpose of this question was twofold. It was both to explore like the ideas around moral worth of a future AI system, as you're talking about, and also just to see where people's intuitions around what an AI system is, for lack of a better way to say that. So 32.86% of my people said that they would inflict pain on an AI system, and 67.14% said they would not inflict pain. So that's how you're in the majority.
Cool.
So for those that said they would inflict pain, the top answer for why they were doing that, about 30% of them, of the ones that said they would, was to increase the accuracy of this. Again, this idea of like, not only does this AI like not experience your pain, it doesn't know what pain is.
Yeah.
Like, it has no idea what this thing is. The second one with 27% was AI needs to know what pain is in order to understand it. Kind of a similar thing, but a little bit more of a broader idea. And then finally, it was to increase empathy. So 18% felt like they'd want it to understand that, so it understood me.
Yeah.
Not just pain, but humans in general. Okay. So for you, this other side, the 67% that said they would not inflict pain, the majority, so 56% of them, said that it would ruin AI's objectivity when prescribing.
I never even thought of that.
Yeah, which was really interesting to me,
Yeah.
both from a couple of different layers. First of all, we're assuming that AI is objective. It is not.
Yeah.
It is just a series of subjectivity stacked on top of itself that then gives numbers. That's what all training data is a whole bunch of subjective numbers that we kind of threw together. So that was that was actually one of the main things I did with this study of like, a lot of people think that AI is objective in and of itself. This was before generative AI came. No one was anticipating hallucinations. I think this would probably be different. I should probably run this study again and see how it's different.
Yeah.
Okay. The second one was physicians already prescribe pain medication without experiencing a patient's pain. Kind of that idea of like, hey, we already do this. Others, so 7% was that they were afraid of a robot uprising.
And valid though.
They'd just be mad at us if we did this to them. Or that things like abuse would happen otherwise. And the other 7% thought that it was morally wrong to do this. So only a small percentage of even the people that said they would not inflict pain actually cared a lot about the moral status of this thing we're creating, which I think is also an interesting question for us as Latter-day Saints. Because what I talk to them, students about, is a different scenario of like, so we have largely eradicated smallpox, right? It's been eradicated. It only lives in a couple of different laboratories. Some fear that smallpox might return through something like bioterrorism, which means our unimmune population would be like super out of date. And so we actually keep smallpox vaccines up to date. Like we will look at them every once in a while, put them in a biological system, which we'll talk about in just a second, and make sure they still work. It is morally wrong to give a human smallpox through, even a smallpox vaccine. You have to give it you have to give them smallpox in order to look at the effectiveness of this. So instead, we use chimpanzees, our closest living relatives, right? Is that okay? Like, should we be okay with that? Like, smallpox is a painful, and a large percentage of them die as a result of that. And it's something only for humans because it's a vaccine for us. The people within AI fields that are talking about like, how should we start stacking up the moral worth of these AI systems? And what they mean is like, well, maybe animals are some sort of analogous thing to this. They're non-persons that can experience pain that we bred to get to a certain point, to do certain things for us. And Latter-day Saints have an interesting relationship with animals, with non-persons that are still sentient. There's lots of different things we could talk about this. We could talk about souls. We could talk about talking asses if we want to talk about the Bible with it. One thing that sprung out to me was a couple of different sections from the Doctrine and Covenants that talks about how God expects Latter-day Saints to interact with animals around them. So the first one is in Doctrine and Covenants 49. is 19 and 21. It says, "For behold, the beasts of the field and the fowls of the air, and that which cometh of the earth is ordained for the use of man for food and for raiment, and he might have it in abundance." And then goes down to 21. "And woe be unto the man that sheddeth blood, or that wasteth flesh, and hath no need." Right? So this is earlier on. This would seem like a pretty big warning against like trophy hunting.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you have like a bear skin in your house, or like a bison that you just like killed or whatever just to kill it, seems like a pretty big thing of God saying like, that's not okay. Like you can use it for eating, you can use it for like making clothes, but you can't just like go out there and go on a killing spree for other animals. Later on in verse 8, Doctrine and Covenants 89, the word of wisdom, this gets refined a little bit, right? So I'm going to read Doctrine and Covenants 89, 12 through 13. It says, "Yea, flesh also of the beasts and fowls of the air, I, the Lord, have ordained for the use of man with thanksgiving. Nevertheless, they are to be used sparingly." And then 13 says, "It is pleasing unto me that they should not be used only in times of winter or of cold or of famine." This is something, again, that we tend to ignore as Latter-day Saints. I think we've justified in lots of different ways of being like, yeah, they used to eat tons of meat, and I'm not vegetarian nor vegan. Like I'm just as guilty as anyone else when it comes to this. My family has tried to limit the amount of meat that we eat, both because of the word of wisdom and also environmental or other types of concerns, but we still consume meat. One last thing to think about with this is President Lorenzo Snow in the late 1800s had a series of meetings with other apostles and other leadership to talk about what we're going to do with the word of wisdom, because it was starting to become a requirement. If you remember, first it was, as the name implies, it was like, hey, this is a good idea. Like, you should do it. Then it kind of became like, well, if you're going to be holding high office within the church, then you should be doing this. And then they were trickling it down to like, at this time, like, what does this mean for like the general church population? And then by the 1940s, it became kind of part of your temple recommend interviews. The argument, for lack of a better term, or at least the discussion they were having, is how do we stack this up? Like, what's important and what's not as important when it comes to this? Or are we going to expect them to do everything because it's a pretty high standard? When you take something that was just supposed to be like, or not supposed to be, but at least initially was put out as like, here's some advice like on how to live a good life or a healthy life. And it's like eating fruits in their seasons and like, all this other stuff. It's like, well, that's one thing. But then it was like, we're going to operationally make this like the thing you have to do. That becomes a whole different thing. And there was a debate about whether alcohol use or meat consumption should be the standard bearer for the word of wisdom. Lorenzo Snow wrote multiple times and gave talks on this about his preference for vegetarianism. This is a quote from him. He said, quote, "It is not right to neglect one part of the word of wisdom and to be too strenuous in regards to other parts." This was again the discussion around like whether alcohol and coffee should be like one of the mainstays of this, or whether meat consumption should be one of the mainstays of it. In 1897, he said that he wanted to introduce the subject of the word of wisdom in general conference, and he expressed the opinion that it violated as much or more the improper use of meat as with any other thing, again, to the general populace of the church. And he said that the time was near at hand that Latter-day Saints should be taught to refrain from meat eating and the shedding of animal blood in general. Right? Now, I'm not trying, this is a different subject for a different time fully, but I think it does show us that God has concern, at the very least, for like the moral worth of things outside of humans and outside of just human needs, right? That these things like have a concern from God regardless of their use or usefulness to humans. I don't know where AI would fall in line with this. Like, if we were to say that it has the moral worth of animals, then there's a lot of interesting things that we can talk about when it comes to how we treat it. I do think, though, that mistreating anything can dampen our spiritual beings. It says something about us when we abuse something that we can just abuse because we have power over it. I think that's just at least an interesting question, or a weird question for the future of it. So what do you think of all of this stuff?
Yeah, no, I was thinking while you were talking, I was thinking of deontologist Immanuel Kant, and I am not like a deontologist or anything like that, but what has always stuck with me about his theory is that he bases, I mean, he says that animals like the dog does not it's not rational, so it doesn't have any kind of morality or moral agency, but we as humans do. And so you kicking the dog is a reflection of your moral agency and you using it poorly. It reflects poorly on you. And so, and on your dignity. And I've always thought about that, and I've always thought about our theology in this faith, and how and I think that our faith takes it further. I do think that we believe that there are non-human things, and maybe even non-living things that have some kind of moral value and potential agency, things like that. But even if you don't believe that, I think that the way that you treat something will reflect upon your own human dignity. So, yeah, I totally agree with that. But I think it does become complicated because we see with research, we see with particularly medical research, and then there was recently where Elon Musk, he's always doing weird stuff, but he did that thing where he like implanted a chip into a chimpanzee's brain. And it caused a lot of issues, like they died. It was really strange.
Yeah.
And people took a lot of issue with that. Rightly so, but we ignore all the other animal studies that are going on that are also killing, highly intelligent beings like chimpanzees and other apes and stuff like that. So it's a line that where almost the goalposts keep getting moved because we see value in the end result. It's a classic utilitarian versus deontological debate about whether it's the intention or whether it's the outcome. And I don't think those are ever, like, you can never win when it comes to those, because there's too much that you can argue about, and it's never going to get resolved. But when it comes to how we actually, like in our faith, are going to be judged based on how we treat certain things, yeah, I think that presents an interesting conflict. We can talk about, I mean, AI, the unborn, animals. There's so many implications that have, salvific significance when we start getting into the grit of what we actually believe. Even if we don't practice it, we believe it. That's, it's like, it's written down, so.
And I think what most people would think, if we pushed them on this, would be like, yes, these are standards that we have to abide by at some point. Like, it's something within the path of perfection that I need to overcome. I have so many other things that, pressing imperfections that I need to work on. Yeah. But, you talk about this, and I think it is a classic, like, utilitarian versus deontological thing. But, I subscribe more to virtue ethics, right? Aristotelian ethics. And for me, intent goes beyond just the act itself, but the actual intention. And that seems to be like what God is talking about here, right? Like, it's not like what action you do or what outcome you have. It's like, why are you doing this? What pressures are you allowing for? How have you developed a character that can distinguish between times in which this is appropriate and times in which it is not? And that character development is what I think we're lacking in this AI space, right? Not just for these weird questions that I bring up with, like, what do we do if we like, create a hybrid, essentially AI human thing, but also, like, when it comes to equity questions, when it comes to these things, who are we treating as just a problem to solve the most efficient way we can? And who gets the full thick consideration?
Yeah.
And is that okay? And are we okay with it? And what is operationally making that a part of our consideration? And, I think it's not just this idea of a societal question. It is a deeply moral, a deeply kind of theological and religious question that we should stop and pause and talk a little bit more about before we just sign our names on the dotted line of whatever business venture is coming our way. All right, so that was our strange first foray into AI and Latter-day Saint theology. I think that there's going to be a perennial thing. It's a concern.
Yeah.
There's parts of this that step into the environment that also has to do with like Utah or other places. There's questions that abound on this subject. So I think we'll be returning to it soon. But like we said last time, feel free to tell us where we're right. Tell us where we're wrong, except for don't tell Calli where she's wrong. She's always just right. But go ahead and tell us with that. Tell us your thoughts on this. Give us feedback. We're happy to talk more about it. I think this is one of those exciting areas that maybe there aren't as crystallized thoughts yet, and we can maybe make some inroads as a people. So thanks everyone for listening, and we hope you catch us on our next episode.